Hello, my friends. AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink. Welcome back to my face and my card making space. And another Halloween video. This time I'm using some oldies but goodies from Honeybee Stamps, and specifically one of their lovely layers sets, which I have a playlist, and I will link to that in the end screen at the end of the video using a bunch of the different Honeybee lovely layers die sets over the years. And yeah, built a cute little scene, did some ink blending to add a bit more dimension to the die cut pieces, splatter, of course, all the fun things. As always, everything I used will be listed and linked in the description box below the video. Tiniest bit of disclaimer this time with the supply list. I will have a link to my blog post. In the blog post will be the full supply list. I use like a lot of different colors of cardstock, a lot of different colors of ink. All of that will be listed, but it won't fit in the YouTube description. We're limited to how much we can put there. So I'll have a couple of like generic links, but if you want to know the specific colors, etc., those will be in the blog post, which is always linked below. My links are affiliate links. That just means that if you click on one of my links, end up placing an order, I do get a little kickback from that at no extra cost to you. That is what helps pay the bills, keeps lights on, enables me to keep bringing out content. And then at the very end of the video as well, I'll have that link to the Lovely Layers playlist that I've got, as well as my Halloween 2025 playlist. And we'll keep adding to it as we get more and more Halloween cards made. That's it for the chatter. Let's get into making the card. So the main focus of this card is the Lovely Layers Scaredy Cat die set, which is super cute. The fun thing about it is, like, the cat and the pumpkin could just be like generic. They don't have to be Halloween themed. The wafer die to make the pumpkin like a jack-o'-lantern is a separate wafer die. And I started with the pumpkin. I did like all my die cutting off screen because it's repetitive. So I did all my die cutting and I used all Altenew cardstocks. And like I said in the intro, I will have links to all the colors in my blog post. And with the die cutting, and I've talked about this before with a lot of Honeybee's dies, there's a lot of the elements have like deboss detail, which just means like detail pressed into the cardstock as you die cut it. So like the face of this pumpkin or the front of the pumpkin has a bunch of deboss detail. So quite often you don't need to do like ink blending or anything else. It's just something extra you can do if you want to just build more dimension. But they'll look great. You could just die cut them, layer the pieces together, move on about your day. So I want to do the ink blending because it's fun. It is. So after I die cut the pieces, I was just sticking them to one of my grip mats and then using some fresh dye inks and little blending brushes to add that depth and dimension to the pieces. And then I had die cut an extra piece using kind of the base wafer die of this pumpkin from some yellow cardstock because I wanted to make the faces look a little more glowy. Again, you could skip this step and just adhere it to the main like orange piece, and then you'd hear the stem and you're done, simple. So what I did was, after I had die cut the yellow cardstock, I trimmed off some of the parts that'll be exposed because all I want it for is to go behind the face. And then I die cut a scrap of just white cardstock with the same little face wafer die, and that I'm using to add more ink blending because I'm just adding ink kind of around the edges of the opening. So again, it just kind of gives that little bit of a glowy look, a little bit more dimension. And I didn't line it up perfectly. I couldn't show because, my camera films straight down. But I was holding the cardstock like up to one of my lights, so you could see through it to try and line up the cardstock die cut. But it doesn't matter. I'll show. I just ended up trimming off whatever hangs off the edges with scissors. And then I've got my little like glowy faces. Another option would be to like coat this yellow die cut with like glow in the dark embossing powder. I've done that in other videos, to really amp it up. But I was in an ink blending mood. So everything got ink blended. You get ink blending and you get ink blending. Everybody gets ink blending. That was what I was doing. So I did that, and I did the pumpkins twice because I wanted one for the front of the card, one for the inside of the card. So once I got the faces like blended on there, And again, I've talked about this many times. When you are ink blending onto solid colors of cardstock using like water-based dye inks, because dye inks are transparent. When you're ink blending onto cardstock, always kind of keep it in mind that as the ink dries, it's going to look lighter, because when it's wet, of course, it's going to look dark on the cardstock. So how you're seeing it when you first blend, it's always going to be much more intense. So if you have a specific look you're going for, or you want like a certain like just depth and dimension, I would recommend taking some scraps and just like testing out the inks you want to use, or do your ink blending, set everything aside. Let it fully dry before you assemble to see like, oh, this turned out a lot lighter than I thought it was going to. So then you could go back in and add like a darker color or just more ink, whatever. Yeah, I just go with it because yeah, it's all gonna lighten up, and I'm totally okay with that. So in the Scaredy Cat Lovely Layer set, there's this little spider. I've talked about this a lot. It's just funny. In real life, like I have severe arachnophobia. It just is what it is. You deal with it. And for whatever reason, when it comes to making like cards, crafting, Halloween themed things, I'm totally fine with it. It does not faze me in the least. Like, I love it. This little spider is the cutest thing. I'm totally okay though if they're like creepy looking. My brain is able to fully differentiate. Like, this is paper, it's an embellishment, whatever. It's not the real thing. We're okay. We're okay. So the little spider, he's got the little body, and then the face portion is separate. So I ink blended those, and then you hear them together. And then I had taken a black marker, because again, the deboss detail was like his little face was pressed into the cardstock. So I just followed that with the black marker just to enhance, so you could see his little eyes and his little happy smile. So that was a little spider. And then the cat, again, multiple pieces. I decided to cut like the front portion of the cat from white cardstock. And then I took a very, very pale gray ink to kind of blend around the edges, again, just to build that little bit of dimension. And then I did the same thing with the face portion. And I've got his little insides of his ears and his little nose die cut from a really pale pink cardstock. And yeah, this cat, options. Because also, I'm going to add the accessories that come in the die set, but you could leave those off. Like, he's fully fleshed out. He's fully finished, like, as is. So, options, always. So, I also blended on this extremely dark gray ink as well. He's got little spots on him. So blended that on, and then I used a tiny a little micro blending brush with a really light pink ink to add some pink to his cheeks, because why not? And then adding ink to the little ears and the nose there. And again, on the face, you can kind of see it at times when my hand is like creating a shadow over the face. There's deboss detail on that as well, which that just helps with lining up, because I've got little separate dies for the eyes, his little nose, and then I'm going to use the marker just to enhance the little mouth area as well. So once I've got all my pieces color, now we can start assembling. The base of the body I die cut from black cardstock. And then the little eyes I die cut from a really pale like aqua color, and as well as black. And then you just adhere it all together. And it's idiot proof. Because, yeah. If I can do it, anyone can. They just, so many of all of the lovely layer sets, and I've talked about this in past videos, it just kind of makes sense where everything goes. It's kind of just, for the most part, largest to smallest. And then if there's like the deboss detail, things like that, it's like, well, that's right. Those are eyes, that's a nose, those sorts of things. So I love it. I love when the thinking is already done for me. So I adhered the little pieces, and then, yeah, the eyes, like the large part, same thing. There's deboss detail, and then you can't see it, but the little tiny black pieces that were die cut as well. There's even the teeniest little deboss dots on them, and those I'm going to actually use as my little guide to add white gel pen, just to enhance his little eyes. He's so cute. So I'm going to take the black marker and just follow that detail, just to kind of make his little mouth stand out a bit more. I could have left it, but Why not? And then, yeah, white gel pen for his little eyes. And then I'm going to come back later and do more white gel pen. That was not part of my plan, but I end up going all out. So then there's his little hat. Love it. Love it. So die cut the pieces from brown cardstocks. Again, adding some ink blending to add a bit more like depth and dimension to everything. And then there's more. There's more accessories. There's a little band for his hat, and then he's got a little like neck scarf. I love it. I love it. It's ridiculous. It's so cute. So I had die cut those as well. Added that bit of ink blending, build up all that dimension. And then we can start dressing our little scaredy cat, who doesn't look too scared. He looks quite content in my opinion. So I'm going to start assembling all of these little pieces and like figured out how the hat, and same thing, like the hat just fits. It just makes sense the way they shaped it. So glue him onto the cat, and his little ears peek out. Love it. Love it. So glue that on, and then the little band for the front of the hat, and then the little band, the little aqua band, and then the little tiny belt clip. So get those adhered, and he's got his cute little hat. Yep. So yeah, and then his little neck scarf. That would look really cute die cut from pattern paper too. But yeah, I was just, like I said, I was like in a solid cardstock and add ink mood when I did this. So got all his little accessories adhered to him, and I can't. And then yeah, the white gel pen. So I just dab them in those tiny little deboss details, and then like I said, I'll come back to that. So for some of my like background elements, this die set, this is the Owlloween die set that actually coordinates with a stamp set. However, in the die set, the die set's enormous. It is literally enormous because there's a bunch of coordinating dies for the stamp set, and then there's some standalone dies, specifically this moon, some clouds, and then the tree that I'm going to use. So I use those standalone dies, and same thing, added some ink blending to build up the dimension to them. And then I go, like I said, all out with the white gel pen. Because once you start, you can't stop. But that is another way to add a lot of detail. So I'd kind of like built my scene. We'll come back to that. And that's when I was like, yeah, we need white gel pen on just everything. So I just went around and added it wherever. As usual, I wasn't following any sort of like light source or anything. I'm just like, this looks like a good spot. Add a little line, add a little dot, and just went on my way. So I just kept working my way around and adding it again all over. You get more comfortable with it the more you use it. I do, I get it. I get a lot of questions about that. Like, just how do you know where to place them? Honestly, it's just, you just go with the flow. I know that's not very helpful, but I had those same sort of questions when I would watch makers way back in the day. And I was like, how do you know? How do you know where to put the highlights? Like, I get that. And I always kind of would just start and I was like, well, maybe I'll put one here, and I'd put a little dot or just a little line. I was like, okay, that looks fine to me. And then I, well, what about here? And then I just keep doing, and now I just don't even think about it. Like, I just encourage you, get your white gel pen out, just add a few little dots, it's not the end of the world. It is just paper. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you get with it. It is one of those things. And I can say that as someone who I felt the exact same way. So, yeah. Okay. That green cardstock, I die cut with another oldie but goodie, the grass border honey cuts, and ink blended that to build dimension. My background is some pattern paper. I know, I actually used some of my pattern paper. One piece, yay me, from the Sweet and Spooky pattern paper pack, which I flipped through just so you guys could see it because it's pretty. And I die cut that with just one of the Honeybee Sweet Stacks rectangles wafer dies, and then ink blended around the perimeter with that Aqualicious ink just to, again, build that depth and dimension. And now we're going to glue everything down. So I just super sped this up because it's just repetitive, So glue down the grass border strips. And then I would just, after I had these bits all glued down, I would just keep flipping it over and trimming off whatever was hanging over the edge with my scissors. So I've got the grass down, and then my moon and these clouds, and then this spooky tree, which I love. Love it. And then trimmed off those bits. And then for my cat and my pumpkin and that cute little spider, these I'm popping up with just some thin foam squares. So it gives them just a little bit of lift, you know, just gives it a little extra dimension without creating like a whole bunch of bulk. So got them popped into place. And then that little spider, which he's just super cute. And then of course we're going to add splatter. If it freaks people out, you could add splatter to just the background, you know, and then adhere after it's dry, adhere like the cat, the pumpkin, etc. That's totally fine. I did think about that, but again, I have been also splattering for a long time because I get a lot of questions about that too. And it's like, how do you know where it's going to go? You don't, not really. You get, again, it's another one of those things where you kind of get a feel for it the more you do it. And I splatter pretty much every single card at this point because I'm insane. And I'm comfortable with it. Can I fully control it? Oh, heck no, not at all. But with this, I was fine. If I was really like, oh, I don't want, on the cat's face, I would have just die cut a scrap of paper with the face wafer die, and I could have laid that on top and masked it off. Like things like that. Like if there are parts of you want to add a bit of splatter to just cuz, and things are glued down, but you just don't want to wreck it, cover it with a little scrap of paper. Mask off the areas that you're just like, I don't want it ruined. Totally works. But for this, I was fine with it. It's a Halloween card. A little bit of black splatter doesn't hurt anything. So I used white and black. I used my white gouache and then my black gouache and my fan brush, and just added a good amount of splatter to that background. And then I set it aside to dry. And while it was drying, I pulled out my Misty and some black cardstock and the Sweet Halloween stamp set. And I'm going to white heat emboss these sentiments onto the black cardstock. So I used my anti-static powder tool, and then I inked up the stamps with clear embossing ink. And I don't press. It's something very hard to like show on camera, but with sentiments, anything with a bit more detail, I'm not pressing very hard. Like you don't need to do CPR on your stamp positioner. Like I would rather ink up and stamp multiple times than like press down, because a lot of times you're squishing the stamps and that presses the ink around, and that's how you'll end up with a blob, or lose the detail of the sentiment. So rule of thumb is to just ink it up multiple times and just lightly kiss the stamp to the paper. So after I had heat embossed the sentiments, my card base is some heavyweight cotton candy cardstock, and it's a top folding A2 card, so 4¼ by 5½ inches. And I stamped more sentiments from the Sweet Halloween set with some Nocturne ink, and then adhered that extra pumpkin onto the inside. And then I can adhere my card front to the card base. And that's why I went with pink this time. It just kind of picked up the pink I used for the inside of the ears and his little nose, and it's just cute. It's just cute. So I buffed away the excess anti-static powder on that black cardstock from heat embossing. And then I used the coordinating wafer dies to die cut the sentiments. And then I die cut the rest of that scrap of black paper with those wafer dies, so I can stack them together to give them that extra bit of dimension. So for the Hey Pumpkin sentiment, just stack them as is. For the Happy Meowloween sentiment, I stacked the 2 layers together and then just trimmed off what I needed, because I'm going to lay this over the pumpkin. And then this will just even everything out so that it can lay kind of flush across the bottom of the card. So once I've got those little pieces adhered together there, I can then pop the sentiment into place. And I'd completely forgot at this point that I hadn't actually adhered the other sentiment, but I'll remember in a second. So got that adhered into place, and then I also added some bling. I have the Sweet and Spooky gem stickers, which coordinate with the pattern paper. And I've mentioned this in the past. I hoard gem stickers. I can't help it. One, I do have like a bajillion lifetimes worth of bling, and gem stickers just it's supreme satisfaction flipping through like packs of these, because it's like they're all laid out so nice in their little rows, and they're shiny and fabulous, and I need to use them more. So I used a few. They're self-adhesive, so I just stuck them into place, and that finished off this card. They were so cute. It was so fun. So, like I mentioned in the intro, I'll have links to all of the things in the description box below the video. And then if you check out my blog post, which will also be linked directly below, I'll have literally like every cardstock color, every ink color. It'll all be there if you are interested in any of that. And yeah, playlist at the end. Thank you all so much for hanging out with me, for thumbs upping, commenting. I appreciate you all so very much. And I will see you all very soon in the next video. Bye. Thank you so much to my amazing Patreon supporters. For anyone that might be interested in joining my Patreon community and supporting me, the link to my Patreon is in the description box below the video. For everyone else, as always, thank you all so much for taking the time to watch my videos, for thumbs upping, commenting, subscribe if you haven't, I'd love to have you. And here's a couple other videos for you to check out in case you missed them. Bye!